those who are jumping in on the recording, we do apologize. Your host forgot to click the recording button. Thank you, Gary, for jumping on there. So we do apologize for missing a few of the slides on the start. Now, something what we wanted to also promote on this course is the App Camp for Microsoft Teams development. This is primarily targeted for ISVs who are building experiences for Microsoft Teams, but there are actually really cool hands-on labs, not only for ISVs, so system integrators and consultants. And also there will be a specific event related on this App Camp material on October 20th, which is a 1-hour event where the cloud advocates will go through the material and explaining the value and how you can reuse the material. Now, we also have the Microsoft Ignite coming up next week, is on October 12th to 14th. So registration is open. Please do sign up for the ignite.microsoft.com. And we do have this as a hybrid event. So you can either be in-house in Seattle in the conference center, or you can join and see the sessions, most of the sessions also remotely. So we are broadcasting this live from the site and from the Redmond. Now, quick recap on the latest news. So this week, we primarily have, well, we didn't have a significant amount of news because the Ignite is coming, and Ignite is the area where we are announcing next week a lot of cool new features and capabilities across the Microsoft 365. But there are some news. So first of all, we have an update on the Microsoft Teams apps coming to preview to Office and Outlook apps on Android. So this is something which we announced back in Build. So May 2022. So you can expose your Microsoft Teams applications in Outlook and in Office. But that was primarily for the desktop applications. So right now, starting then September and October, you can actually have those same application exposed also in the Android clients of those applications. And the second announcement there, or a blog post, is a tutorial on building a stock update notification bot for Microsoft Teams using a Teams toolkit for Visual Studio Code. So, and that's a great summary tutorial from Carrie Trinder. On the Microsoft Teams blog, we had 2 blog posts available. The first one was the monthly summary on the updates for Microsoft Teams into August and September. So really great summary on, okay, from an end user perspective, administrative perspective, and developer perspective, what are the latest and greatest on Microsoft Teams. And the second one is actually kind of interesting as well, more from an end user perspective, but it's really explaining how we have our AI, artificial intelligence-based innovations to help to minimize and even eliminate the negative impact of bandwidth constraints when you are having Microsoft Teams calls. So a really cool blog post in the Microsoft Teams blog on what the investments, what we're doing here. Now, and then we'll do a quick recap on what is the latest on the Microsoft Teams developer documentation site, and Srrs is here to cover those. Srrs, take it away.
Thank you, Vesa. Hello, everyone. I'd walk you through the Teams documentation and platform updates. Today, we have 4 updates to share on the Teams platform. Let's start with the first one. The first one is manage license for third-party apps. Teams allows independent software vendors, admins, or users to manage SaaS licenses for third-party apps purchased by Teams Storefront. ISV admins or users can easily assign, unassign, use, and track SaaS licenses. The second one is Teams mobile app now supports file downloads to local devices. You can configure an app to enable users to download files from the web view to their mobile devices. Downloading files is only supported on Android Teams mobile client, and only unauthenticated files can be downloaded. Third is the Adaptive Card in Search-based Message extension now supports universal actions. To enable universal actions for search-based message extensions, the app must conform to the schema for universal actions for adaptive cards. Along with the app must have conversation bot. They must already have a conversational bot, so you must use the same bot that is used for your message extension. If the card is sent in a group, the app must specify team or group chat scope on their bot in the manifest. And finally, the fourth is the doc update, where we've introduced a code snippet for capturing videos using camera through Select Media API. So these were the platform updates. If you have any feedback or suggestions, please post on aka.ms Teams platform feedback. The link is available in the footer. You could also follow us on Twitter and configure to the RSS feeds to get regular platform updates. Thank you, and over to you, Vesa.
Excellent. Thank you, Srrs. Really, really cool development on that side as well. And then we'll move into the weekly or the really cool thing. We'll have the together mode picture together with everybody in the call. So let me put the camera on. Let me share my screen. So we'll get everything moving in here. And as people are opening up or the video, we will grab a GIF animation from here as well. A few more seats in the room. Let's see how this goes. A few more. Let's wait a few more seconds before we do a hand waving. We'll grab a GIF animation. I can see Aisha there. I can see Bob and Paul and Fabian. A lot of familiar faces in the room. Let's wait a few more seconds before we start recording. Not yet. Wait for it. Wait. I'm going to start recording and let's do some hand waving, everybody. Thank you, everybody, once again joining. Awesome to see all of the lovely faces in the house and in the room. Thank you. Something strange is happening on the back seats there. So excellent. And thank you, Gary, for doing the save on the back row as well. But thanks, everybody. Really, really cool. Now, let's then actually get back on the slides. So today we'll have 3 demos. We'll start with Brian Jackett and Cameron Parker on the introduction of privacy APIs on Microsoft Graph. Then we'll go to Gary Trinder on building your first notification bot for Microsoft Teams with Teams Toolkit for Visual Studio Code. And then we'll have the final session with Bob German and Aditya Shalabali on the account linking for Microsoft Teams app. But Brian, I guess you'll start sharing and we'll move forward from there.
I've got the deck pulled up here.
Excellent. Thank you, Brian. We can see the deck. Take it away.
All right, excellent. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Brian T. Jackett, joined by Cameron Parker, who's one of my teammates. And we're going to do another kind of round of introductions on some new APIs that are coming out there. If you were on a couple of weeks ago, we did some things on the eDiscovery Premium APIs. This time around, we're actually going to talk about some of the privacy APIs. This is all part of what we call the Security, Compliance, Identity, and Management, SCIM APIs. And these are going to be available to us actually in GA, in this case, on the V1 endpoints. So some great things that we'll be able to show up for you today. All right, let's jump into things. So today we've got a couple of different things that we'll be going over. We'll give you a quick little overview of the APIs themselves, some different use cases for this. Cameron's actually going to demo some of those different scenarios for you, so you can actually see what does this actually look like inside of Postman, but then also see the end results of this inside of our environments as well. Talk a little bit about some of the licensing / monetization impacts for this. Talk about how you can actually go and get a demo environment for this. So some great ways to actually be able to try this out if you don't already have licenses or you don't have an environment you can test this with. And then we'll open things up for Q&A and give you some additional resources as well. Now, as I mentioned, there are actually 3 sets of SCIM APIs that are out there. Today, we're actually going to be focusing on the far right one out there, which is our privacy APIs. This actually relates to something called Subject Rights Requests, or SRRs. If you've ever dealt with things like GDPR or the California privacy laws, this is very much in that space. Things like the right to be forgotten or the, what data do you have on me? If you're looking for that type of information within your system, basically within inside of M365, there's a great way to be able to actually go and find out, hey, what are those things that are content related to myself, to another user, someone else that you're trying to get that subject rights request on. Now, in terms of just kind of the overall for the API with this, the real goal for this is to be able to help our customers and our partners be able to automate a lot of the things that they do maybe today in the UI or through the compliance portal. When you have to do a lot of these kind of repetitive tasks, or you've got like a bulk operation that you're trying to do for those subject rights requests, that can be very tedious. Would you rather have somebody, spending hours going and doing those, filling out the forms and kicking off the request for this? Or would you rather be able to kind of prepare some type of CSV file or something else to be able to input and then just query it with the API? Lots of ways you can actually get some efficiency and be able to be very productive having that API available to you versus having to actually do this directly through the UI for out there. A couple different things we can share just from a sample use cases for this. Again, you can do things for automation of, there's kind of 2 terms here. There's subject rights requests. There's also data subject requests, or DSRs. Fairly similar just in terms of what the naming for these things are. Just some kind of small difference between them. But DSR is another term we also use for those SRRs out there. You might be trying to automate the creation of those things, and this could be coming from a line of business application, could be coming from an intake form. Maybe you've got something like a Power App or a Power Automate to be able to actually go and kick off those types of requests. We're also seeing a number of third-party vendors who are also going and doing integrations with this. They may have their own system of record, they may have their own tool, their own kind of SaaS service or a website or an app that they're using, but they can actually reach into M365 and be able to automate those types of tasks directly through the APIs out there. So lots of great ways we can be able to go and work with the data. I'll actually turn things over to Cameron to talk to us a little bit about some of the different sample queries that are out there.
All right, thanks, Brian. So basically, one of the primary use cases we have around this is the creation, right, and automating that SRR creation. And so just have here a sample query regarding the post operation being made to create that subject's write request. And so you can see populated with certain information that you would pass in the body of that request in order to create that SRR, and then link to our documentation as well. In case you want to learn more about that specific query. And of course, we have documentation for each of these APIs. And then so moving on to the next use case. Next big one's going to be getting that SRR status, right? So you create that SRR, you might have done some other things with this, get some additional information or perform some action, right, related to that subject rights request. And so we have other queries as well to get details about the SRR itself that you're looking to get, say, status information on, as well as an API to get a final report. Once there's additional information that's been added by that privacy administrator and that kind of thing, as well as an ability to both add and list notes, right? So if someone goes in, adds a note to that particular SRR, you can get that information as well, which again we'll be demoing here shortly. And so documentation for that as well. And then from there, I believe we can go ahead and move into the demo. So I will go ahead and share out my screen for this. All right, so you can see here, so this is Postman. And so for anyone who's not familiar with Postman, Postman is a great API testing tool that you can use to basically just craft raw HTTP queries and that kind of thing to test out various REST APIs. And so in this case, we have an official Microsoft Graph, essentially collection that you can fork that has these queries kind of pre-crafted, so you're not having to manually create all of these. So in this particular case, under our compliance subfolder here, you can see the subject rights request with our two use cases that we were discussing, and we will do some test queries on. And so just a quick note about Postman. So you can see some variables in here as noted by the kind of double curly braces. And so where that would be populated is under your variables at the top of the collection. So you can see that I've kind of got some stuff pre-populated here. And then so let's go ahead and get started. We will go ahead and get a access token. And so in this case, we are using delegated permissions. So we're going to go ahead and basically populate our application registration information so that we can get that. And so you can see that these are also variables, which I have kind of in my environment set up here at the top. And so with that, we will go ahead and get our access token. And you can see that it automatically went ahead and got me my access token that we're going to use. If you were logging in for the first time, being delegated permissions, you would actually get a prompt, right, to sign in. And then if you hadn't previously consented to the permission or permissions being requested, right, you would see a consent prompt for that as well. But of course, that was done prior to this, which is why you don't see it here. All right, so moving under our subjects rights requests, and specifically we're going to go ahead and move forward with creating that SRR. And so you can see here I've got my post request set up in the URL pattern for the creation of that SRR, and again populated with some information here such as like regulation, the name that you want to use, some information about the data subject of that request, and we will go ahead and send that query. And if everything goes well, we should get a successful response. Takes just a few moments. All right, and we got back a successful response, our HTTP 201 created, and we can see the information returned from the SRR that we just created. You can see there's quite a bit of information there. And then in addition to that, if we go look at our at the portal here, we can do a quick refresh, and I would expect, I believe it should show up by now. Yep. And so here's our SRR that we just created as visible in the subject rights request portal, right? So if you needed to do some manual action outside the API or just needed to go look at it in the portal at a later time, you can see that that SRR is here, and we can see that it's currently in the data estimate progress section. So going back to Postman, another option is to list SRRs that you have available. If you notice from that, the UI, right, we had several SRRs there. And so you can see essentially what this API is doing is enumerating that list of available SRRs, right, which you could use to grab the ID of one of these and feed that into a GET request, which we're actually about to do here in just a moment. So you might be wondering kind of how we're getting that ID for this next request that we're making, that we're seeing a variable for here, and you can actually see it's populated. And so how did we get that? Well, in Postman, this particular query is set up essentially to read the response from that and then save that ID of that SRR we just created into a variable. All right, and so again, moving on to the tracking the status of that SRR. Again, we've populated this variable with the SRR that we just recently created. So we want to get details about that specific SRR, not list out, that full list of the several SRRs that we had created as we saw in the portal. And so you can see here we've got the various stages. So that you can check information about essentially the status of this request, right? And so you kind of saw a little bit about that when we saw the response of the SRR that was just created, but you can also use this get SRR request in order to see, again, the status of that request. Again, like we discussed earlier, there is an option to get a final report. Now, you're not going to see anything for this one. We do get a status OK, but again, it's just kind of like a null response, right? Just because we haven't completed that SRR, we don't have a final report available just yet. Same for get final attachments. Again, these are things that get added by the privacy administrator. You will see an error in this particular one just because, again, we don't have anything associated with this yet, being a brand new request. So we get our 404 not found there. But as I was mentioning, the ability to create and list notes, right? So in this case, we're just going to create a simple note and send that, and we should get back a successful response for that post call. We get our 201 created, and then we can turn around and do a list of notes. So if we had several notes, we can go back and check and see what our notes are. And then jumping back to the portal here, we can take a look at that SRR. And we can look at things such as our notes, like our note that we just created here, again, and just through the UI, seeing things like the history, status, etc. All right, and Brian, I will go ahead and stop presenting and turn it back to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Cameron, for showing that. Really great to see things not only in the API with Postman, but also then going back to the portal and seeing where that actually shows up. So let's flip back to our slides here. Got a couple things just to wrap up with. One thing to note for this is subject rights requests in kind of the Microsoft Priva space. This does require a separate set of licensing. This is not tied to E1, E3, E5, or the A1, A3, A5 types of SKUs, things like that. Every time you do a subject rights request, it will require a creation of a new one that'll require a new essentially purchase for one of those SRRs. The current pricing for this is $200 US per subject rights request. If you are looking for, bulk or volume kind of licensing for this, please do reach out to whoever your licensing expert is, your resellers, things like that. Just note that this is not going to be one of those APIs or the things that's included directly with your existing licensing. There are some additional things for that. So please be aware of that. If you're looking for a way to actually go and try this out, though, we do have a slide for that here in a second, so you can see more on that. Also note that if there are any types of permissions or other things that might be applicable for this, these are using delegated permissions. And as such, if you're trying to view things inside of the portal, if you're trying to get access to different areas, there are a set of Microsoft Priva roles and permissions that can apply for this. Please do take a look at the URL on here. We'll post this into the chat just so you can go and take a look at that. If you're looking for ways to actually go and get a demo environment for this, as we mentioned previously in the community call, there is the Microsoft 365 developer program. With that, you can get that sandbox tenant, 25 E5 licenses, again, self-renews out there. The other area, as we're mentioning for the licensing for this, there is a trial for Microsoft Priva. You can go to aka.ms/try-priva, and you'll get a set amount of those SRRs available to you inside of your tenant. Or you'll get it for a specified amount of time for that. So feel free to take a look at that, again, as another way to try this out before you actually go and purchase things. Great way to be able to test it out there and see if it's going to meet your needs for this. And then the link also to the Postman collection. Cameron did a great job of actually packaging together the different sample queries that we have out there, putting them onto the official Microsoft Graph set of Postman collection out there. You can find more at aka.ms/graph-postman. And we'll leave the slide up here just for a second if you do have any questions. A couple different links to show you as well. If you want to look more about those privacy APIs, you can find them at aka.ms/priva/API. And also as well for those permissions, here's the URL for that as well. So you can take a look at that, and we'll post these things into the chat window.
But from a timing perspective, I guess we can follow up on the questions in the chat. It's just easier that way.
Yep, we'll follow up in the chat line for ones. All right, appreciate everyone's time, and have a good rest of your call.
Excellent. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Cameron. Really, really cool stuff. And then let's jump on Gary's screen around building your first notification bot for Microsoft Teams with Microsoft Teams Toolkit for Visual Studio Code.
Thank you very much. Hopefully everyone can hear me and everyone can see the slides that are in front of you.
All good. Take it away.
Right, let's begin. So as Vace mentioned, this session is going to cover building your first notification bot using Teams Toolkit for Visual Studio Code. A little bit about myself. My name is Gary Trinder. I'm a senior cloud developer advocate at Microsoft, focused on Microsoft 365. Basically, I'll leave this slide in there. You should be able to take a look. And if you want to contact me, ask questions, feel free to reach out. More than happy to answer any questions that you might have. Quickly, just to cover what I'm going to go through. So we'll cover what is a notification bot, quickly cover Teams Toolkit for Visual Studio Code, and then I'll actually go through, show you the steps of how you can create your first bot and then run it and see how it works as well. And I'll jump in and just show you how this bot works, what packages it's using SDK-wise, and then I'll leave you with some resources to find out more information. But hopefully at the end of this, you should be able to have a good idea of what a notification bot is and go and build one in your own tenant. So let's get started then. So what is a notification bot? Well, a notification bot really is a great way of being able to extend Microsoft Teams with the ability to send proactive notifications into various Microsoft Teams locations, either that as a personal app that's installed in the user context, or a team channel, or a chat, or a group chat as well. So a great use case for this would be, you are wanting to react to something that's happening in an external system. When that happens, you want to send a message into a certain location so people can see it, format that, maybe as an adaptive card with some buttons to get some immediate action on that. So that really is what a notification bot is. So we're going to go through and use Teams Toolkit for Visual Studio Code to build our notification bot. So Teams Toolkit for Visual Studio Code, if you're not aware, is a extension that's available in the marketplace that you can install into Visual Studio Code, and it gives you the ability to create and debug and run and publish Teams apps. So it comes with lots of project templates. Notification bot is one that we're going to look at, but it's got many others as well. You may have heard Teams Toolkit for Visual Studio as well. That is a enhancement for the Visual Studio application. That is based on .NET. I'm not going to go through that today. We can cover that in another call. So if you're really interested in that, please let me know in the chat. Today it's Visual Studio Code, so we're going to be in JavaScript and TypeScript as we build our bot. So with that, let's get rid of the slides and let's build. So I will share my screen. Okay, so I've opened Visual Studio Code already. If I didn't have Teams Toolkit installed, it's very easy to install. So I can search for Teams Toolkit. Very easy, just click install. When you've installed it, you get the Teams Toolkit icon in the sidebar, but when you click on it, you get a few options. You can create your new Teams app. So let's do that. So we want to create a new Teams app. We do have samples. I won't go into it now, but something that you might want to look into for some examples of apps that have already been built. So we're going to choose a notification bot. You can see there's other types in here that cover command bots, tabs, SharePoint framework tabs as well, other bots. So there's a lot of capabilities in Teams Toolkit for Visual Studio Code for building other types of apps, but let's use the notification bot template for now. We've got 4 different options that we can choose. We have the first option is a Restify server implementation, which is a HTTP trigger. So this is you sending a HTTP request to your bot, and that will trigger a message to go into the different locations in Microsoft Teams where you've installed it. The next 3 are all Azure function based. We've got the HTTP trigger, which again is the same as the first option. It's just got a different implementation. We've got the timer trigger, which runs on a schedule. And the third option is you can have both. So when you create that project, you can have messages going in there every 30 seconds or ad hoc when you need it. So let's choose that one. We got the option for JavaScript and TypeScript. I'm going to go for TypeScript, and we want to choose a location where we want to create our project. So let's just call it community call. Hit enter, and that starts the scaffolding. So this is Teams Toolkit now generating our project. It's fairly quick. It's actually done and completed. So what I'm going to go do now is we'll just run through kind of the folders that are in here, just so you've got an idea of what has actually been created for us. We've got the .fx folder, which holds various configuration files. These are configuration files for Azure, local development. These are placeholder values that will get injected into the app manifest. So you can come in here and you can create your own properties. Get to that bit a little bit later. Project settings, which is some internal code for Teams Toolkit. You shouldn't need to go into there, but this is kind of how everything is controlled. VS Code, these are the debug profiles. So this is when we hit F5. Here's basically where all the magic happens for Toolkit, where we do a lot of activities and pre-provisioning to allow you to basically get your bot up and running as fast as possible, and I'll go into more detail when I actually do that later. We have our bot folder, so this is where our source code is, and we have a templates folder as well. So this templates folder provides us with a app manifest and also bicep templates for deploying and provisioning to Azure. There is a nice little feature. If we open the Teams Toolkit side panel, you can see that we've got lots of different options in here. We've got an edit manifest file. So if you don't know which file you need to look for, do the updates, click that button. It opens up the manifest, and we can see in here that we've got a Teams app manifest with placeholder values in there that get injected in when we actually run our app. And the Toolkit basically handles all of that complexity for us, like the valid domains, which will change as we are running the bot through development. So that's how you can get to your manifest. A couple of other things to point out is I've already installed Teams Toolkit and I've authenticated my account against my Microsoft 365 tenant. So that's already showing as signed in, and also that side loading is enabled. That needs to be enabled on the tenant for us to be able to develop against it. So if you've got a sandbox, that's done for you automatically. But if you're using another type of tenant, then you might need to go into your admin settings and just enable that side loading for this to work. Okay, let's look at the bot code because that's what everyone is interested in. So here we have our bot as an Azure function. So we've got three functions: a message handler, the HTTP trigger, and the timer trigger that have already been created. So if you're familiar with using Azure functions, this should be again pretty familiar. We've got the definition files in here, which tells us that this is a HTTP trigger. Again, this is HTTP, the different endpoints, and that we've got our timer trigger as well that is by default running every 30 seconds. So the code for the two triggers, the HTTP trigger and the timer trigger, are in here. So this is where our logic is going to live. And you can see it's just a standard Azure function that is being invoked here. And we've got some helpers from the Teams Toolkit that basically simplifies working with the bot framework. So that there is a layer of abstraction that you don't have to basically handle all sorts of different events that you would have to have done using the bot framework SDK. So this, just to quickly cap what this actually does, this code, when it is run, it will go and get all the locations of where the bot has been installed, and it will loop through all of those targets, and it will send an adaptive card. So if we just quickly take a look at that, we've got an adaptive card already created for us. So we can see that we have a model for card data, which describes the shape of our data. We have a template, which is this notification default JSON file, and then we have the data that we can inject into that at runtime to render dynamic values. If I quickly look at the adaptive card, you can see that we're using the templating placeholders in there, and we have an action as well to open a URL. One folder just to call out, so we have this internal folder. You shouldn't need to come into here, but it's good to have an idea of what lives in here. The initialize file is where our bot is actually instantiated. So this is the wrapper that the Teams FX SDK provides us with. So this provides a nice, easy contract to set our config, so our bot IDs and our bot passwords, as well as various other configurations as well. So it's a nice way of being able to see, okay, where are the values that have been passed into my bot. So time to run this project. I'm not going to do that on this one because there's a number of checks that are going to happen, including an npm install, and we don't have that long to wait. So I've already gone and run this bot and already done that install. So to run this bot is very simple. We can go to the debug pane and we can choose the profile for the browser that we want. So I'm going to use Edge and I'm going to hit run. And we can see here, if I just expand this, you can see that there's a number of prerequisite checks that are happening. It's a bit fast, but essentially what Toolkit's doing is it's checking the node versions, it's checking that you've authenticated with your 365 account, it's checking that you've got Azure Functions core tools installed, and that npm is there as well. Additionally, what it's also doing is it's going off to the bot framework and it's provisioning a bot in the service for us. So that's where the ID and the password comes from. That's injected into our config. When Teams Toolkit has done its job, it will open up the browser and it will open up our bot. Now, this bot has two triggers. So it has the timer trigger and it also has the HTTP trigger as well. So we've actually seen, we've already got a message sent in. The timer trigger has already kicked in. This is the side loading. I mentioned before, we've got different places that we can install this app, team, chat, or actually a meeting. If you just click add, that will install the app as a personal app into the user context. So I'm just going to do that for now. And we should see that we've got our timer triggered event that has come through. That adaptive card has been sent. Now, I mentioned that there's a HTTP trigger. If I go back to Visual Studio Code, we can see that there's an endpoint that has been stood up for us, this API notification endpoint. If I come over to PowerShell, you can invoke the service. So just send it a post request, which I will do now, and I'll get a 200 response. And if I go back to my app that is running, we can see that that message has appeared in Teams in our chat. So by basically just simply creating the project, running it, Teams Toolkit has handled everything for us that we need to get started, provided us with the two ways to send the messages into Teams. I'm quickly going to just jump back to the code. So in this example here, we've got the HTTP triggered notification. We're actually getting some context back that says, oh, okay, this is a person context. I'm just going to show you the code in the trigger, just so you can see how you can then further develop this. So if I go back to code, let's go to the source file and we go to the HTTP trigger. Let's minimize this. So we can see here that we get a type back from the target. So if we just take a quick look at the target, so this is essentially our bot installation, we've got access to various methods and properties. So we have access to an adapter. So this is the underlying bot framework adapter. So like I mentioned, the SDK is providing that abstraction, but if you need to go to the lower level, you can access the adapter through this way. We have some helper functions to get the channels in a particular team, get team details, the members for the chat or the team, helpers for sending an adaptive card or sending messages as well as text, and also accessing the conversation reference as well. Another way of accessing that underlying API that's provided by the bot framework as well. So I'm going to leave that there because we're rushed for time. But as you can see, if you're going through this, take a look at the comments that are actually in the file as well, and you can see how you can write the if statements to only run and send cards if your bot's running in the context of a group or a group chat or even a channel as well. Yeah, hopefully you'll be able to enhance this bot to do what you want it to do. I'm quickly now just going to jump back to the slides. Okay, so just to summarize, so notification bots, great for sending proactive messages into different Teams locations. 2, Toolkit provides the quickest way to get started developing Teams apps. I've shown a notification bot, but there's plenty of different scenarios that you can build with Teams Toolkit. And Teams FX there is providing a layer of abstraction to simplify working with the bot framework, which is really, really useful. Some resources to learn a little bit more. Please check out the docs for Teams Toolkit and also Teams FX SDK as well. Thank you very much for listening. Apologies, I've tried to get through this as quick as possible. You'll be able to watch it back on the catch up and probably slow it down a bit. But yeah, thank you very much. If any questions, put them into the chat and I will definitely do my best to answer them. And Vesa, over to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Gary. Really cool stuff, and not worry about it. Unfortunately, the time slots are 15 minutes, but really cool stuff. And you do have that awesome blog post available as well. Now, let's go then, Bob, on you and Aditya's side. And anybody who has questions, please, let's use the chat for those, because we do have more than 200 people in the call. We cannot, unfortunately, go to audio related on the questions. So please use the read and ask. But Bob, I can see the slides.
Great. There we are. How you doing, Aditya? We're ready to go. So yeah, I think we're just going to be kind of informal here between the two of us. So I've got some stuff prepared, and Aditya, just jump in whenever, wherever you wish on this, because it turns out we both were pursuing this very similar path here, and it's a really important pattern we wanted to share with the community here. So let me start. So the topic is account linking between Azure AD and Teams apps. What this is talking about is if you have a Teams app and you don't want to use Azure AD, you can, but there's a lot of reasons that you should use Azure AD. And if you've already got an app, maybe it's an enterprise app that uses some other system, or maybe you built an app with .NET and you've got SQL authentication, or maybe you used some other OAuth provider like Ping or Identity Server or Okta or you name it, right? It's still usually possible to use Azure AD as well. And that's what we're going to kind of go over today. So let me show you the example. And this is borrowed from the App Camp labs that I'll point you to later. And so I have here a very simple application with kind of a very basic login system built into it. So I'm going to just log in as, let's say, Andrew. And you can see this is so insecure, I don't even have to give a password, right? But you can see that it logs me in and I can see my data. I can see my orders, so it knows who I am. These are specifically my orders. And that's all well and good. The problem is if I go into Teams, I can't get a single sign-on experience. So I have to click a button, and the button is there because it's a pop-up window, and we all know the browser rules with pop-up windows and stuff like that. You have to click a button to get there. And so now I can do the same login, and it works, and that's great. And I could declare victory at that point and be done. But then our presentation would be very short, and our users would probably be kind of unhappy. So here's my top reasons for supporting Azure AD. The first one, yeah, good old Northwind, right? It'll never die. Northwind database will never die. So first, it allows single sign-on across devices. So users aren't going to get any extra prompts. And those prompts can be extra annoying on your mobile device where you're trying to, log in again and again. Single sign-on, you could, never think about it again. You're logged into Teams, you're done. It also includes some key security features like multi-factor auth and conditional access, where the policies are controlled by the enterprise. So that's going to make the enterprise a whole lot more comfortable, even if your alternative auth scheme supports those things. Now you've got the user trying to come up with another MFA prompt, right? So again, let's simplify it for users. No extra usernames and passwords, no extra MFA prompts. It's easier for team owners who would have to then, if you're inside of a team with Azure AD, you could set it up so that membership in the team was enough. And so you add somebody to the team, they immediately get access to the right parts of the application that they need. In this case, it would be which ones are my orders, right? But the thing about that is that if it's a separate login system, somebody, probably the team owner, is going to have to keep track of everybody's alternative login and add and remove them as appropriate as people come and go from the team. So that's a big overhead and something that I think a lot of people might not really, be organized and remember to do that up front, sort of, and then later somebody leaves and they're like, oh, what was that person's login in this other system, so I can take away their access. And maybe the admin just goes, oh, I'm too busy. And now somebody outside the company, maybe who left under unfortunate circumstances, has a login to get into that app and company data that they shouldn't have. It's easier also for M365 admins who ultimately get held responsible for this kind of stuff. And, it's important for them to have a way of managing access. This is also required for monetization in the Teams App Store and for the M365 App Compliance Program. And not to put you on the spot, Aditya, did I miss any? Can you think of any other big, yeah, we should have done Azure AD kind of moments?
The user retention is much higher. I want to emphasize that again. It's much higher when they do SSO and support Azure AD. It's significantly higher.
Oh, that's a really good one, and I should put that on the slide. I actually got that feedback from partners as well, that one partner actually, they pretty much, the reason that they started their app and now there's more features and they're taking advantage of more Teams features was because of the Azure AD and their users were demanding it, and that it's helped their adoption quite a bit. So with that in mind, we've got limited time. I'm not going to go too deeply into it except to say that Azure AD is at the core of Microsoft 365 and Microsoft Teams. A tenant, an M365 tenant, matches one-to-one with an Azure AD instance. And then all the users and guest users and the app itself are all registered inside of Azure AD. However, when you have a scenario like the one I just showed, you end up with kind of two islands. So Teams, Graph, all the data behind Graph. Oh, that's another one I forgot. Another reason is so that you can call Graph, right? If you want to get anything about the user, maybe you want to, check their calendar to see when they're available, or maybe you want to just get their profile. Well, obviously, if you're in the other island, you can't do it, right? So that's the challenge. And I'll call out some folks that I've worked with in the GPS team and the partner team have also run into this issue. The solution kind of generically, and it's going to be a little different for every application, honestly, depending on how it's written, is to link these identities. So basically, you get the user to log in with Azure AD and the SaaS application's identity. So for some moment in time, they're logged into both. And then you link the two identities in a database of some sort. So in this case, I'll show you the database in the demo that follows, but it is just a very simple little JSON-based database. And we're going to put the Azure AD user IDs and the SaaS application's user IDs into a table so that when a user logs into Teams with single sign-on, instead of making the user log in again, we're going to do our authorization based on the linked identity. So let me show you what that looks like for a user. I'm just going to pop in here and stop my my server and start it again, using as if I had just done one of the App Camp labs instantly there. And now if I come back here and I log out and I refresh, I'm going to get a different screen. And it's going to say, well, please log in using your Northwind employee login to link it to your Teams login. So this is going to accomplish the account linking. So it looks kind of the same as before. I'm just going to log in as Andrew, and it works like before. We should probably take this logout button away because it doesn't do anything anymore. You can't, you're just automatic. As fast as you would log in, log out, you get logged back in again. And that's it. Now I could go to my phone, I could go to another computer, and I'm never going to get that prompt again. Why? Because it's actually stored here in the back end. And if I kind of drill into here to the data, you can see there's this little identity map here, and it's taken the Azure AD user ID and the employee ID and associated them there so that we can just kind of automate that process the next time the user comes back.
Yeah, actually, and Bob, just to jump in here, this is an approach, and soon we'll present another approach as well. This is an easier approach to understand, but could potentially have a few issues, certain issues if you were to do it, but it's really easy to understand. It's a great stepping point. And so we'll present again in soon another approach. And Bob and I are going to present one that is a little bit more advanced, but it's probably a little bit more secure in other things as well. But
sure,
this is a great starting approach.
Yeah. And I know that, I think that a number of partners have used this effectively. Where I've seen it fall over is if there are dozens of microservices all doing the authentication themselves. Then, a lot of apps are designed with one single check for authorization, sort of at the entry point to the app, and this works fairly well in that. So if you'd like to try this out, you can go to Teams App Camp, aka.ms/appcamp, and go and take what you'd want to do is take this B path instead of this. So the A path assumes that the app already had Azure AD, and the B path, you'll see that you set up the non-Azure AD app, and then that's the transition I just made, was to add the identity mapping. So it's a pattern. You're going to have to kind of figure out how to apply that in each situation that you're in. So I'll just sort of wrap it up with this slide. We've got a hands-on lab with the B path. We've got the account linking. Now this has been, Aditya just wrote an article and a sample on this. And this is great. He goes into a little bit more depth on how this all works. And is there anything else you want to say about this?
No, so the sample illustrates the other sort of more advanced approach. And so that's the one we'll go through again later.
Okay, sounds good.
Let's follow up on any questions on the chat. And we are anyway hitting the hour. So thank you, Bob and Aditya, on that one. So let me go on the slides here and just to close up for today. Now, thank you, Brian. Thank you, Cameron. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Bob and Aditya on this one. Really, really cool stuff. It's great to have this covered. And also, all of the demos are recorded. So I do apologize. I messed up the intro, so we did not do the recording on the intro. We'll get it fixed for the next one. Now, this overall recording, whatever we got, which is, again, all of the demos, we lost some of the intros in the start, will be available in 24 hours at the Microsoft 365 community YouTube channel at AKMS M365 videos. You can subscribe there, so you'll know when the video is available. You can follow also us on the Microsoft 365 Dev or in Microsoft 365 PMP. Either one of those you'll follow up on and get notifications on when stuff is getting released, including samples, demos, videos, and all of that. The next Microsoft 365 platform call is on October 11th at 8 a.m. Pacific time. So again, 1 week forward from here, and you can download the recurrent invites from AKMS M365 calls. But that's it for this one. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you for the great demos, and thank you for the feedback. Remember to provide us the feedback. We are building the Microsoft 365 services for you, so we need to know what works and what doesn't work. And if you have suggestions related on how we can improve our community efforts, please do let us know as well. But thanks, everybody. Let's stay in touch. Have a safe rest of the week.